Hello, and welcome to Spirit Among Us. In life, we generally like foundations. We like to have security in things like our homes, our jobs, and our relationships, among other things in our lives. We like to have things that we can count on, especially these things. We want them to be reliable. We want to know that they aren't going to fail us, that they aren't going to fall apart. But unfortunately, life isn't always something we can count on. Things don't always work out. Some things aren't as secure as we'd hope they'd be. But we have been given some advice when it comes to this. This week, we're going to be taking a look at another parable that Jesus has given us, the parable of the house on a rock. Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 through 25. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. This is the first half of the verses in this little mini parable here. This first example is of someone who built their house on a rock. Now, if we think about this is a logical thing to do. This makes sense. To have a solid house that can weather a storm, if you want to have a house that can weather a storm, it needs a foundation. It needs something solid to stand on. If the ground beneath a house is constantly or easily shifting around and moving all over the place, then the house will shift around with it. But if it's built on a rock, the rock won't be moved by rain and strong winds or floods, because the rock is solid. The rock stays there. Now, on the other hand, there's another way to build a house. And this Jesus talks about in the next few verses. Matthew chapter 7, verses 26 through 27. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. This is the example from Jesus of someone who foolishly builds their house on top of sand. Sand is easily moved. There's nothing that's really holding it together. You think about picking up some sand in your hands, it's just going to fall through your fingers. Have you ever been to the beach? Even just walking on the sand displaces it and moves it around all over the place. So how could a house stand if it's built just in the sand? The answer is it can't. When the storm comes, when the floods come, if a house has no foundation, if it's just sitting on top of sand that moves around, the house will fall. Now, Jesus has given us both of these comparisons to give us insight into our own lives. He's not just giving us practical advice on how to build a house, or where to build a house, rather. But he's giving us advice on what we should be doing in our lives, especially when it comes to his commands. We have heard the words of Jesus, and he has given us a revelation through his word of many of the things he said while he was here. Many of the commands and the parables that he's given us. We have access to those through the Bible. And now we have a choice. We can be like the wise man, or we can be like the foolish man. We can listen to Jesus and follow his commands, or we can just hear his words and not listen. So let me ask you this. Do you want your house to be solidified? Do you want a firm foundation to stand on? Do you want your life to be solidified? Listen to Jesus and follow his commands. Otherwise, you'll be like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. Thank you for watching, and God bless.